Qué descarado es cuando quieren tirar el precio para un sitio para otro.
A ver, ya debemos estar otra vez en directo. Ya debería ir.
Bueno, pues ahora cuando nos saluden ya sabremos que estamos en ello.
Sí, ya
va, ¿no?
pone que ya va.
Perfecto.
Com seu domínio e pareça
Problemas del
profissional
directo,
no
señores.
online.
Sí, que sale el internet un ratito.
Para seus clientes que você transmite.
Ah, mira, podemos hablar hasta más bajo y todo porque el micro lo pilla
confiança
entero.
com Dead.
Perfecto.
Vamos a poner el podcast yo la verdad que al trader que comentas yo no le conozco.
Yo tampoco. Esos son los mejores.
Ah, dice, lo de la diferencia entre Bali y Tailandia no lo hemos oído. Ha sido ahí cuando se ha cortado el
pues mira,
directo.
sí, lo puedo.
Bueno, nada, al final que Tailandia es el país más desarrollo, o sea, que el primer país del sudeste asiático que se expandió al turismo y está muchísimo más explotado y relación calidad-precio pues es peor. Aquí hay mucha más oferta y todo más nuevo de villas y de restaurantes y todo es mejor, la verdad. Igual que Lombok, la isla de Lombok, ahora se está poniendo de moda y se está empezando a construir ahí y seguramente en los próximos años sea mejor que Bali. Venga, vamos a darle al podcast. ¿Tú conoces a estos traders?
No, es que lo he visto recomendado por uno que es bueno y he leído buenas opiniones en los comentarios. Y bueno, no sé, no tengo ni idea de lo que es el tema de las opciones y eso, como lo tradeará este hombre, pero tenía buena pinta, tenía bastante buena pinta. Me gusta la gente que hace cosas distintas. Y el tío este opera muy raro. Entonces, ¿sabes?
Sí, para ver qué hace. Bueno, como he dicho, el podcast va a estar en inglés, pero quien nos esté escuchando únicamente ahora mismo y de inglés no controle mucho, pues que no se preocupe porque vamos a ir comentando también las partes más importantes.
A ver, echa tu pega un poco para acá, para que lo lea.
You've broken one golden trading rule. You don't use stops.
Yeah, no stop. It's been everything. It's what's really set me to get to 8 figures. Because I was stuck at 7 figures for a little while, but to get to the 8-figure mark and making millions of dollars in a month or 2 months, that's what you need to do. This is what set me into a different tier of trader. I think if you want to learn options and you want to actually grow your account effectively, efficiently, you have to. That's, I think, what separates like a good trader from a great trader.
Would you say you're someone who's always had a high tolerance for risk?
Yeah, I have a high risk appetite.
Es que el tío este, por lo visto, es súper loco operando. En plan, le mete muchísima caña y ha hecho grandes cosas, pero claro.
Going from, I would say, 4 figures to the 6-figure mark is the hardest part. You don't need to be a genius to be profitable or to figure out like, how to find the right trades. I think it just comes down to just 2021, remember GME? I bought 50,000 shares of GME at like 40 something bucks. I was in Maui with my wife. Within like 2 hours, 3 hours, the stock had a short squeeze. That was my biggest trade. I ripped 2.7 million in 24 hours on that stock. On average, in a month, I'm probably taking about 75 to 80 trades.
They would all be A+.
I like to think so, yeah. Probably logged over 6,500 trades, and my win percent is like 74% or something, 73, 74%. There's one type of setup where you're winning like 80% of the time. And for me, it's...
Un crack el tío, ¿eh?
The number one podcast in the trading space, the fastest growing, and that's
No lo
thanks
sé.
to every
Luego lo
single one
buscaré.
of you.
Me gusta porque hace cosas, ya te digo, opera su movida.
Welcome everyone back to the Words of Wisdom podcast. We are back once again and still the number one trading podcast in the world and the fastest growing thanks to all of you and our incredible guests. We're still on our huge US tour. We're on state number 4 or 5, I think 5 now. And we are in Las Vegas. Now we've come here to speak to an incredible trader. And just before we get into that, the tour has only been possible thanks to our sponsor TradeZella, the number one trading tool for all traders out there, so make sure you check that out. Thanks to them, we've been able to make this possible. But today I'm very, very excited. We've been waiting for months to be able to do this podcast in person. It's a podcast exclusive, the very first podcast. We always love that. We're always honored to be able to host incredible traders. And talking of which, this trader's been trading for over 14 years, has done multiple 8 figures, and that is all verified as well. It's the one and only also known as the Elite Options
También
Trader.
si Bitcoin se mueve,
Thanks for having me.
lo vamos a
My pleasure.
Sí, lo tengo aquí al lado.
Things straight off. I know
A ver,
you're
ahora
waiting
romperá
for
los
most of
máximos
this.
y sacará liquidez y eso.
I'm going to
Pero
go
mi
straight in the
entrada la
deep end.
tengo
Because
en
what a lot of people at home might not know is though you've
89.260, para no quedarme fuera. Es en 89.300, pero bueno, prefiero asegurar.
made multiple 8 figures in your trading career so far, you've broken one golden trading rule, as they may hear of. You don't use stops.
Yeah.
Que no usa stop
Why is
loss.
that?
No.
So
Que es la regla
when trading
de oro que
options,
dicen que ha
especially
roto.
weeklies or
Es un
monthlies,
trader que no
there's going
utiliza
to be
stop
high
loss.
volatility.
Vamos a ver
So
cómo lo hace.
in a given week, your option position can move 50, 60, 70% both ways. So
Con coberturas,
I
imagino.
size for zero. I every position that I have, I'm ready for it to go completely in the red. And over time, for me, that's produced the best gains because you're mentally prepared for every scenario. So even when I started with $6,000, I knew that me trying to set a 10% stop loss, 20% would never work because you have to either be right when you click buy, or you're going to get stopped out within the next day or 2 days, especially as it approaches expiration. So me sizing for zero was the best way for me to see the full potential of a trade. And when I started scaling up to $100,000, $200,000 trades, this worked in my benefit to the most extent because by the time you get there, your confidence in your ability is so high that the probability of you being right is much higher. So that's what's going to set you apart from the average trader to the good traders to the great traders, is being able to take your max risk and be okay with it. So
when you say
A
that,
mí no me
though,
está
you're not-
convenciendo,
are you
Lo de
risking
operar sin
essentially
stop
the
loss porque no lo está justificando con nada.
Más
Porque
adelante
de
lo
momento-
explica.
de momento, de
O sea, sí,
momento.
esa está haciendo la presentación.
Ya,
También
ya.
creo que el tío,
Oh, that was a Porsche.
no sé yo si es muy bueno a la hora de expresarse. Sí que he visto
Ya.
antes en la intro que han hecho que sí que dice cosas con sentido y cosas guay, pero es verdad que por ahora no he visto que haya dicho tampoco ahí ninguna locura.
trade allocation or for that idea allocation?
yeah, so it's just let's just say it's like $1 million account. So
I want to make my
¿Y la tele no
friends
tiene más sonido, tío?
and
Estoy medio
graduate.
sordo, tío.
max risk you should be taking for just an average trader is like maybe 3%, 4% maybe. So it's just per trade. So if it's like an A plus setup or a prime setup where the stock's about to break out, then you'll put in 40 grand, right? And you have to be okay with the outcome of that.
Hay que
Meaning,
sentirte bien.
if you're not okay with it going to zero and you're okay with losing 10 grand, then just buy 10 grand, right? And over time, you'll hit those 500%, 1,000% gainers. And the money you make from that is much more than if you held the $40,000 position. You're going to sell before you hit 80 grand every time.
And how important has that been, though, for you to be able to achieve the results you have, do you think?
I think that if you want to get to a certain level, you have to understand how to manage your risk first. And setting my stops at no stop it's been everything. It's what's really set me to get to 8
Claro.
figures. Because I was stuck at 7 figures for a little while, but to get to the 8-figure mark and making millions of dollars, sometimes in a month or 2 months, that's what you need to do. Because the outcome, you can't control the outcome, but you can control how much you want to lose. And if you're okay with winning and losing, then the results will come.
Was it something that
Claro,
you
es que es un tío
struggled to
que,
implement to begin?
que lo tiene muy claro. Es decir, es un tío que no tiene miedo a perderlo. Entonces arriesga muchísimo, pero que sabe dónde quiere llegar. Entonces, para ganar X tienes que arriesgar X. Eso es algo así. Si tú no vas a hacerle una cuenta un por 700 si no arriesgas, lo que pasa es que,
Ya,
claro,
obviamente.
eso no es para todo el mundo. Yo no,
Y la mayoría de la gente que opere así perderá todo
sí,
lo que tenga.
perderá todo. Por eso te digo que si el tío este es muy bueno y aún así, aunque sea muy bueno, si operas así puedes perderlo todo.
A mí no me está convenciendo.
No. A ver, el tío ahora ya tiene un
Ya,
pastizal
ya,
que flipas,
sí,
pero claro, también te digo, le pudo haber salido bien. A ver, también lo de GameStop,
Was that
Ya.
quien comprase GameStop ahí de puta madre, ¿sabes?
having a stop one of those rules that you'd heard of as well coming up?
Yeah. Like, because that's what you're taught. You're taught to, okay, make sure you set a stop for every trade, stocks or options or whatever you're trading. And it works for some people. That there's nothing wrong with setting a stop. But if you're trading options and there's of course, higher
Claro, es
volatility
que
compared
el
to
tema de
trading,
opciones es algo que yo,
stocks
por
or
ejemplo, no
maybe even
controlo.
futures.
Me da igual,
You have to
necesitamos un
size for
stop.
zero. I think that.
No, al final lo que él está convencido principalmente de una operación y se la jugó.
No. Pero va sin stop, pero no mete todo el margen de una.
Ya.
Entonces, en plan, él mete un 20% de la cuenta.
Ya, bueno, pero un 20%
Sí.
de una es... Joder.
Claro, ¿qué pasa? Que en un mes pasó de operar, empezó con $6.000 y en poco menos de un año tenía varios millones. Pero claro, muy loco, ¿eh?
I've been trading for 14 years and I've tried everything. I've tried all types of strategies. I've tried everything to try to be profitable. And this is what set me into a different tier of trader. So I think if you want to learn options and you want to be successful and you want to actually grow your account effectively, efficiently, you have to size for zero. Yeah.
And would you say that advice, though, is it less so for the beginners coming in, more so maybe edging towards an intermediate, more experienced trader?
Yeah. So I would say if you're just starting out, you can't trade every day, right? If you have $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, not every day is a day for you to trade.
Claro.
So what I did was I started with 6,000, and there was times where I'm waiting days to weeks
Claro,
at a
si
time.
tienes
to
una
take
cuenta
one
pequeña,
trade.
operar
Right,
todos
so
los días.
there's
Él
obviously
espera,
moments.
con una cuenta pequeña esperaba el momento en el que lo veía muy claro.
Claro,
Es
sí,
lo que yo entiendo por lo que le está
es cierto
diciendo
que hay
ahora mismo.
entradas que... Mira, me acaba de sacar esto, perfecto. Hay cierto que hay entradas que... ves mucho más claras que otras. Hay momentos que ves súper claro ciertas entradas. Entonces, bueno, lo entiendo. Creo que el tío lo que hacía era operar una vez a la semana o una vez cada X, a veces ahora lo dice, pero lo que hacía era meter un leñazo fuerte y meterse súper convencido.
Sí,
Entonces,
lo veía muy claro.
hmm.
Eso, a ver, eso yo no lo veo mal. Por ejemplo, si tú tienes un proyecto muy analizado, una altcoin, por ejemplo, o una cripto, y lo tienes muy claro y te apalancas y todo lo que metes vas a fondo perdido, que es como si vas sin stop, si te sale bien, no, o sea, no me parece ninguna locura. Siempre que sepas lo que estás haciendo.
Claro, el tema es que yo creo que empezó con 6.000, yo creo que él ya tenía mucha experiencia. A ver, ahora que lo que va diciendo.
Right. There's people that only trade momentum, and that's mainly what I do. And when I see momentum, I will go pretty aggressive during that pocket of time when the market's ready to rip higher. So you can apply it when you're first starting out. If you're competent and you understand that, even if you grow the account from $5,000 to $20,000, you're still broke. Like you can't really, your situation doesn't change. So if you focus on learning the right fundamentals, right, sizing for zero, understanding when to actually trade when there's momentum, those fundamentals will carry on to when you have a much larger account versus trying, the stop loss in the beginning and then having to relearn it later on. You're already in your habits, right? And it takes more time to convert from using the stop loss to getting that mentality of allowing everything to go to zero.
Would you say you're someone who's always had a high tolerance for risk?
Yeah, I have a high risk appetite. Personally, like when I didn't have money, I didn't necessarily care about money. I don't really have an attachment to it, like in terms of like my identity or emotionally. So yeah, money, and I just see it as a way to make more money and to use for different things, like take care of your family, take care of, your friends, and whoever needs.
Eso es una cosa que a mí me pasa muchísimo ahora. Bueno, me pasaba antes, pero ahora me pasa todavía mucho más, porque es en plan, si a mí me saltan ahora 20 stop loss o engancho dos operaciones de 50.000 cada una, es que me da igual porque mi vida no va a cambiar. Es decir, yo voy a seguir exactamente igual. Si me saltan 30 stop loss o si hago 150.000 pavos en 3 meses, yo voy a seguir viviendo exactamente igual. Entonces, al final solo cambia un número en una cuenta. Entonces, no me molesta. Es como, ¿sabes? Entonces, eso es algo que es muy importante, yo creo.
Yeah, I have a very big risk appetite.
Do you think that is almost necessary to be able to go with that sort of rule set as well?
I would say to a certain extent, right? And every person is different in the sense that success in trading means different things to different people. And not everyone can get to 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, even 9 figures. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because I have such a high risk appetite, I was able to get to where I'm at. But if you're not that type of person, that you don't have that personality trait, there's nothing wrong with making 6 figures or 5 figures a year, but you have to understand that about yourself, because there's people that want to be my position. They say, I want to be like Brando. I want to make a lot of money. But can you handle losing 100,000 a day, 200,000 a day, right?
Claro.
Like my friend visiting asked me on Friday, he said, oh, how much did you lose today? I said, I lost 120,000. He said, wow, like if you didn't say that, I could never tell you lost any money. So you have to be okay with losing if you want to get to the top.
Would you say that you were always that way, even when you were, say, first starting out and taking some losses then, or would they impact you a little bit more at that stage?
Yeah, there was definitely a little bit more pressure when I first started because...
Claro. Me está gustando, ¿eh?
Sí, sí.
A mí me está gustando, la verdad.
Lo que dices está bien, pero bueno, lo del stop loss es una locura.
Es que cada persona,
ya.
esto es tan personal.
No, yo pensaba, no, pero sin stop loss que iba a aplicar algún tipo de cobertura o algo, pero bueno.
No, pero si un día pierdes 120.000 es porque tiene las pérdidas limitadas. Pero
you don't have
ahora veremos lo del stop loss, lo tiene
a
que
lot of
explicar.
capital to work with, and you have to kind of handpick really carefully what you want to trade. And yeah, taking a loss in the beginning was going from, I would say, 4 figures to the 6-figure mark is the hardest part.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because you don't have, your margin for error is so small, and typically when you only have that amount, your total net worth is probably very low, and it's probably the last amount of dollars that you actually have. So when you get to that 6-figure mark from 4 figures, you probably have built some type of system that actually works. So now it's scalable, meaning going from 100 grand to $1 million is a lot easier. So that's the way I did it. This way I try to teach people is once you can get to that 6-figure mark, that's when you can build momentum in the way that you trade and build like a system you can scale to 7, maybe 8 figures if you have the competence.
Was there anything in particular that you had to go through besides just the numbers we mentioned, for example, like the scaling and having that system that helped you with the risk appetite and handling those to the losses and the wins that were coming along as you were growing?
You know what? Like,
was there ever a barrier that you'd hit where it was a bit of a struggle to overcome?
Yeah, I would say seeing myself go like from 50 grand to 100 grand, it's a lot of
Brando,
Brando
o algo así.
So it's hard to kind of deal with that, the frustration of not seeing any progress, like at face value, meaning you're not making any money, and it seems like you're just, starting at zero every single week, but you're actually learning a lot.
With the risk appetite,
no sé cómo se llama,
handling the losses and the wins that were coming along as you were growing.
You know what? Like,
was there ever a barrier that you'd hit where it was a bit of a struggle to overcome?
Yeah, I would say seeing myself go like from the 50 grand to 100 grand, it's a lot of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to kind of deal with that, the frustration of not seeing any progress, like at face value, meaning you're not making any money, and it seems like you're just, starting at zero every single week, but you're actually learning a lot more about yourself, learning more about your trading style. And if you have the competence to fail and pivot and adjust, I think that breaking through those obstacles will be a lot easier. So that's, I think, what separates like a good trader from a great trader is there's nothing wrong with failing, but as long as you can see what you actually did wrong and you pivot, right? The ability to pivot, I think, is what is great in business. It's great in trading. So they're very synonymous, but the benefit of trading is you find out very quickly if you're wrong, versus when you're doing business, whether it's retail, you're in fashion, you open a restaurant, if you're in fashion, you're buying inventory 8 months out, right? Yeah. And then you have to sell it, you have to market it. You don't know if it fails until a year later. But if you're trading options, I mean, you can find out within a couple hours. Yeah. Right? So that's what I like about options is you learn quickly, and you should adjust based on like your failures quick. So
as part of that learning curve though, and being able to learn from it, I'm guessing there's a review process of your trades.
Me gusta mucho lo que acaba de decir, porque realmente una cosa que me diferencia, o sea, que para mí fue una diferencia en mi vida, no sé si a ti te ha pasado o a más gente que haga trading, al principio cuando fallas te jode mucho. A mí, yo recordaba que al principio me molestaba muchísimo.
Depende de la cantidad.
Yo era más, al principio era más por...
A mí depende de la persona, yo creo que a mí depende de la cantidad.
A mí me jodía mucho, no era por el dinero, sino...
Por el hecho de haber fallado.
Por el hecho de haber fallado al principio, me molestaba mucho. Porque a diferencia del póker, por ejemplo, que yo venía del póker, si yo voy con una mano más fuerte que la tuya y luego la pierdo,
Sí.
yo lo he hecho bien, claramente.
Ya.
Pero en el trading, digamos que hasta que no interiorizas...
Ya que lo has hecho bien, pero que el mercado puede hacer lo que le dé la gana.
No, porque
¿O
no lo he
cómo?
hecho bien. Entonces, yo pensaba al principio,
ya.
¿vale? Yo al principio pensaba así. Al principio pensaba, por ejemplo, ahora mismo si esta operación me hubiese pasado hace tiempo, yo hubiese pensado, tendría que haber salido en los 4.000 de antes, al final me he llevado 300 dólares, lo que sea. Lo he hecho mal porque estaba más 4.000 y me he llevado 300. Tendría que haber sabido lo que iba a hacer el precio. Pero ahora realmente no es así. Ahora entiendo que para que me lleguen las operaciones buenas, tengo que fallar tiros.
Claro.
Y tengo que estar constantemente cogiéndolas.
Claro.
Y lo que él dice está muy guapo, porque lo que dice es como que la gran diferencia de un trader es el entender, el fallar y aprender. Y muchas veces te queda... A mí me pasaba que la cuenta me pivotaba, por ejemplo, me lo invento, de 50 a 60, de 60 a 55, de 55 a 57, de 57 a 50. Y me frustraba. Y en realidad estás comprando experiencia gratis.
Claro.
Mientras no quemes la cuenta. Entonces está guapo.
Data, is that a big element of that progress?
Yeah. So the first thing that I always try to tell people is there's a time of day where you perform best, right? It's either, it could be the first 2 hours of market open, or it could be maybe the last hour. And that's where you first want to start. There's this pocket where most people are like, okay, this is where I'm comfortable trading. This is the most volatility in the first hour. And that's where I make my money. So I would say try to stay within that window. And yeah, so that's the number one thing.
So in terms of reviewing data, though, is there anything specifically you would look at?
Yeah. So another thing too is there's certain trade setups that you perform best in, right? So if you look at like a year's worth of trades, there's one type of setup where you're winning like 80% of the time.
Profitable trading really boils down to two things: opportunity
Claro.
and volatility. Every
Eso es publicidad, ¿no?
Sí.
is
Your key process is looking for those levels.
Yeah, that's really all my strategy is. It's just
Really?
support and resistance. Yeah.
Do people get surprised by that?
Yeah. They're like, okay, Brando, like, so what indicators do you use? Like, how do you like find that trade? And then I'll just say like, okay, SPX, 6,100. Wait for that level when it comes. That's one like big level. It's like all-time high. So when I tell that to people, they're like, well, what else should we know like about that? And it's very simple. Just wait. Like the patience part is the hardest part. It's just waiting for a level that I talk about, like Tesla when it broke the recent all-time high 414. And I keep telling people, like, wait for that level and just see how the market reacts.
Espera momentos muy
And it went from
específicos.
418 to 488 within a couple weeks. So if you're trading options, you can make a lot of money.
What reaction would you be looking for? Say at these
Lo va a
levels?
contar y todo.
Yeah. So basically, like let's say Tesla is approaching 414, and SPX is at, let's say it's approaching 6,000, like around psychological level that you either see a sell-off or you see more momentum. And for this example, Trump got elected, right? Market kind of did a big gap up, and everything started to really break out. So if you see SPX line up with a really important level, and then you see like a sector-leading stock line up as well, those produce the best gains.
Claro, esa
So
explosión.
that correlation.
lo que
That
trabaja.
correlation between the index and the stock, like that's like my bread and butter, is just lining those two up and making sure they're kind of moving kind of in sync. Yeah.
What would invalidate that level for you?
Yeah. So like let's say SPX approached 6,000, right? And it drops 50 points. And then Tesla also gets rejected, then that's a clear...
So it's the inverse of that.
Yeah, but I would say though, if let's say Tesla got to 414, the all-time high, and then SPX rejected at 6,000, drops 50 points, but Tesla only drops like 5 points, then there's like some relative strength.
Lo que
in
mide
the
es la
stock.
fuerza relativa de la acción con respecto al índice.
Claro. He escuchado mucha gente, hablando con un trader de Big también, que usan mucho ese tipo de configuraciones y se apoyan no solo en un gráfico, sino en gráficos de distintos activos y buscan ciertas cosas en esos gráficos a la vez y entonces cuando operan. Sí, es algo que está guay.
So two things can happen. Either the stock bounces or Tesla will break lower. So in that case, I would say there's a higher probability that SPX will come back up. Yeah, but with trading, it's case by case.
Of course.
So you got to really analyze like what other stocks are doing as well, like the mega cap tech stocks that they move the market a lot too. So you're gonna have to try to line those up too. But it's
We talked about your strategy now being quite simplistic, as we said, the levels and the correlation there. But was there, in your process and in the development as a trader, did you try out other more complex strategies, indicators, and all sorts?
Yeah. Like in the beginning, like my charts were like filled with like moving averages and using like Fibonacci and RSI, like MACD. Like it was just a whole cluster of all these lines, trend lines, like try to confirmation bias of like, the trade will work. But I found out like over the years, I would say probably 4 years in, that the best...
¿Qué dice?
Dice, busca correlaciones entre gráficos, ¿no? Sería como fijarte en Nasdaq, TX, SP500.
Sí, bueno, a ver, también el SP o el Nasdaq, principalmente el Nasdaq, lo puedes utilizar como guía para el Bitcoin en cierta forma, pero bueno, este chico, por lo que yo entiendo, opera opciones y se fija en el comportamiento del índice y en la acción de la que tiene opciones para entrar o no entrar.
Claro, también dice que busca, por ejemplo, eso, que si por ejemplo sale Trump elegido, hay noticias positivas de los mercados, Bitcoin está en máximo histórico, por ejemplo, SP500 está en máximo histórico, todo está como está cociendo, ¿no? La jugada. Sí. Entonces usa ese tipo de momentum para posicionarse.
En acciones de más riesgo, como ejemplo Tesla.
Claro.
As traders don't really use any of these things. It's really simple strategy of like support and resistance, right? And within support and resistance, there's more to it. Like there's the horizontal lines, obviously, and then you have trend lines, like a bullish trend or a bearish trend, drawing these lines, and you have Fibonacci retracements, and then the psychological levels, like the round numbers, like 50, 100, 200, 1,000. So when I say support and resistance, there's like subcategories within it, but it's very simple. You're really just waiting for important levels, and you don't need to be a genius to be profitable or to figure out like how to find the right trades. I think it just comes down to just being patient and waiting for just the right levels to trade off of. So
what allowed you to make that realization, to keep it more simplified versus having a more complex strategy? Because a lot of people who come into trading
y quedarse con lo que les funcionaba,
for the most part, unless they have like really good education early on, which isn't usually the case, they come in with that same mindset. It has to be complicated, or this shiny object over here, and a lot of the time they're jumping between strategies. So what was it for you that allowed you to go and have that realization of simplifying and making it cleaner on the charts for you?
Yeah. So like in the beginning, like these things can work if you know how to use the indicators, like the MACD, the RSI. Like I don't deny that it can't work. It can, and it does. But when you're in the wrong trade, right, you're gonna find 10 different reasons for it to work, right? And trying to find 10 reasons for one trade to work is usually a recipe for failure. Like, and I found that every time I was in a bigger trade, I would like read up news and find upgrades and find anything to like see the market in a way where maybe
eso pasa muchísimo, que si tú quieres ver que va a subir o baja, lo puedes ver perfectamente.
Over time, I realized you should only have maybe one or two reasons to be in the trade, right? Number one is the level, and number two is like just kind of overall sentiment. Like, is there bullish news being produced in the stock? Is there an event that's coming up that could move the stock? And if it's above a certain level and there's a catalyst coming, then that's really all you need to be in a trade. And I'm not the smartest guy. Like I don't read all the fundamentals. I don't read financial reports. It's just simply just waiting for certain levels and then having the conviction to just take the trade. So.
One question I get asked a lot in terms of me asking a guest I have on the podcast is, what did you have an aha moment, like a moment that things clicked in a different way and you saw a lot of progress from?
I think when I realized that, kind of coming back to what I said in the beginning, is when I started sizing for zero is when I started to actually be in the right trades. Because at that point, I'm objectively just taking what I want to take as a trade and not trying to chase my loss on another trade or trying to make back something from 2 days ago. So that was when I really started to make a lot of money, is when I started sizing for zero.
In terms of the difference, is there any key differences that you've seen from yourself or even other traders that for example, that between the 5-6 figure traders versus the 7-8 figure traders?
So number one, as we said, is the risk appetite, right? Like if you're not ready to lose like 6 or even 7 figures, which has happened to me in a day, then you can't get to that level as like a younger person. Maybe when you get older, when you really develop the risk appetite over time, but to get there, in your 20s and your 30s, you have to have a big risk appetite, and that's the number one thing that separates people from you to make like real money. So that is really the main thing. I think that because there's a lot of smart people that understand the charts, they understand what trades to be in, but they just don't have that
ability to size
up. And not everyone is supposed to be on that level either. Not everyone can get there. It's just a matter of like, it's kind of like in your blood, right? Having a big risk appetite.
Can you talk to us about a large loss that you faced?
Yeah, so April 2023, I'm trading SPX,
que a mí no me molesta aumentar los números cuando va tocando.
At one point, like,
ya, pero llega un punto que
in April, yeah.
Si te cuesta en un futuro.
Puede ser, pero es verdad que a mí nunca me molestó de pasar de trade de 200 a 400, 400 a 800, no me ha dado nada. Es que ni siquiera cuando estuve en el trade este de 20 y pico mil, que luego, claro, a ver, el cuerpo te pide cerrar, y a veces he cerrado antes de tiempo y la he cagado. Hasta que aprendes a quedarte más tiempo, pero que no me pesa el rollo de estoy en 20 y pico, tengo que esperar que suba a 40 y pico porque o por ejemplo, lo que ha pasado este trade de 4000, ¿no? No me pesa mucho. Pero claro, es lo que tú dices. Habrá un momento, si sigo subiendo, que habrá un punto donde sí que me joda, supongo. Pero al final, bueno, pues práctica, supongo. Pero también habrá gente que no le mole, no sé.
And listen, every great trader breaks their rules, right? And I was averaging down to the point where I thought like, okay, I have a large bankroll, this will come back. And it never came back. So I took that L and moved on from there. But
what was the process going through your mind at the time there?
Well, the thing is like you kind of have like an ego, like when it comes to money. And
sí, no puedes tener ego cuando se trata de dinero.
I've made so much, I'm successful, my track record's amazing. Like there's no way I can be this wrong, right? And a $200,000 loss turns into 400, and then you're down 800, but then it comes back down to 500, and you're like, oh, okay, no, we're on the right track now. And then you wake up the next day, you're down $1 million, and it just and then you hit max pain at 1.5, and then that was it. Yeah.
What did you do after that? What was the process you took after that? The steps you took after that?
Well, you kind of have to just reassess what you did wrong, which is very clear, the averaging down.
Hay que tener mucho estómago para ver ciertos
did I
números
take
y
any
aguantarse.
time off?
Sí.
No,
sí.
I didn't take any days off, but I just sized
Tienes
down.
que entenderlo, yo creo, tío.
To kind of build up confidence again. So I'm probably
trading
trading
hacerte el clic.
1/20th size.
Pero hacerte,
just to
pero
see if I'm
no
on the other
es
side of the trades now.
a base de martillearte, sino a base de entenderlo. En plan...
Entenderlo y martillarte también.
Sí, martillarte, sí. Pero para mí la gran diferencia es entender que si yo no se me va a break even este trade de 4000, nunca voy a llegar a mis objetivos. También es como hacer una regla de 3, rollo, es que si no...
Sí, lo tienes que entender, pero tienes que acostumbrarte a ver esos números y eso se consigue con un trade, otro trade.
Sí, para crecer más fuerte, sí.
4 weeks, kind of just getting back in the right mindset to bounce back, so...
Buat website praktis dengan AI Website Builder Hostinger. Tulis konsep website, lalu
Los anuncios aquí son la hostia.
It is interesting because I can imagine I've seen people who take even smaller losses than that. Probably maybe not as consistent traders. That would be fair to say. Not as consistent yet, so they probably haven't built that experience, so they haven't built the experience and knowledge of as you say, you will make mistakes. Those mistakes will vary depending where you're at in your journey. Some will be very large, some will be smaller, etc. But they happen. Versus, I think the early on traders they assume that traders are perfect. When you're consistent and profitable, that's it. Like, you won't make a mistake, and if you do, it's very, very minuscule, to the point where you wouldn't even class it as a mistake. So when they then do it, they feel crippled. Have you ever faced that in your career at all, where you really felt you had to take a break, and you would question if trading was real, or question if trading was for you, and if it was going to be possible?
No, I think that like you said, like with new traders, they think like a trader like me or someone that's very experienced is that the money just flows in. We've got it figured out, and we wake up and you click a couple buttons and you make a lot of money every day. But I think that even for me, I'm still very much on my toes every day, because one wrong decision and I could be right back in a situation where you could lose 7 figures like very quickly. So I think there's always a lot to learn. There's always more to learn about yourself and about the markets, how they move, because the market's extremely dynamic. It's always changing. So I try to stay in that mindset, because complacency, it exists, it's real, and especially when you get comfortable financially, it's easy to kind of fall into a space where you think you know it all.
I remember you mentioning in terms of that period between the 5 to 6 figure mark being the hardest part, especially because financially, it's not going to crazily change your life, and no doubt you probably can't pay yourself from trading as much as you'd probably like to, because you need to scale. But what does that look like for you in terms of financially wise? Is trading your only source of income, or have you now been able to diversify so that you don't actually need trading income to live, essentially?
Yeah. So I've been trading since I was about 19, and I never had a day job other than that. But about 6 years ago, I started a trading service. So I started an account on X, had about 50 followers, and when I reached 100 followers, I said, I think I'm onto something. I kind of was like happy about that win. So I started a trading service, scaled it, making multi-millions a year. So I would say if you are looking to be a trader, I think having a second income is not a bad idea, because it takes a lot of pressure off of you to make money and to pay the bills. So having that extra income really is extremely helpful, because it forces you not to have to trade every day. And trading, you're not making the same amount every week or every month, right? It's when the market presents an opportunity, you either take it or you don't, and you may not make any money for 3 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. But I know a lot of traders in November and December that made more money those 2 months than they did like all of 2023. So like, if you are competent, you can find those pockets where there's momentum. You can make a lot of money, but it's not consistent, I would say.
Well, that is the hardship with trading. I think, again, it goes back to that misconception about that a lot of traders have, is that once you're profitable, you make money every single month, and you will never make mistakes. That same premise, that same mindset. And I think it's a dangerous one, because then you're setting yourself up for, not failure necessarily, but you're setting yourself up for a rude awakening at some point, right? Or you're always going to be chasing. And that, I think, does lead to that strategy hopping. I think that's the mindset that really leads to the strategy hopping, because they might have a good strategy. I've seen people where they've got a good edge and it's performed well month on month, but it's not winning all the time, 100%. Some days are slow, some days aren't. And because of that, literally because of that, it's like, let me try this next thing, because that might be the thing that gives me 100% strike rate and gives me really strong confidence and clarity on the markets. And then that misconception just
yo creo que eso
it never
es una
goes
de
away
las
for some
cosas
traders, I think.
más malas del trading. Es decir, yo creo que hay un porcentaje de gente que si pudiesen aceptar que es irregular, porque lo que le pasa a la gente es que busca...
No, claro, el mercado no se está moviendo esta semana ni la semana pasada como hace 3, no es lo mismo oportunidades.
Claro, y aparte, en mi caso, por ejemplo, yo estoy tradeando peor de que estoy en Bali, no pasa, pero no pasa nada.
¿Pero tú crees que es por estar aquí?
Es por
y
todo.
Por no tener,
o
es que el mercado se está moviendo diferente.
No, pero yo lo he hecho muy mal. Yo la de 77K, eso no se me hubiese escapado en Málaga en la vida. Yo lo he hecho muy mal. Pero que no pasa nada, porque al final tienes que hacer...
El largo
eso no se me hubiese escapado a mí en la vida, y yo estaría ya al largo ahí con 4 o 5 bitcoins y ya me daría igual lo que pasase. Porque pienso que no va a volver, ¿sabes? tendría mi punto de salida más alto. Pero lo que quiero decir es que el problema que hay, como la gente no quiere asumir que esta progresión es irregular, buscan estrategias de 1 a 3, 1 a 2, 1 a 1, porque necesita la persona sentir que cada día, pues mira, si voy a 1 a 3, hoy hago 3
No, pero bueno, eso depende de la estrategia, porque tú puedes tener una estrategia de 1 a 1 o incluso
pero
negativa
es
y que
muy
sea rentable. No,
pero es
depende.
mucho más difícil. ¿Cuántas veces tienes que llevar la razón en 1 a 1? Más veces de las que no la llevas.
Un poquito más si supera
Claro.
al 50% porque tienes que quitar las comisiones.
¿Por qué me gusta a mí, por ejemplo, un 1 a 20? ¿Vale? O uno,
Ya, sí,
porque
sí, estoy
puedes
claro, estoy de acuerdo.
fallar
Lógico,
muchísimo.
lógico.
¿Qué ocurre? Que para llegar al 1 a 20 tienes que entender que el trading es irregular y que tú vas a tener un mes de ganar menos 2.000 y otro mes de ganar más 15.000 y después 3 meses de ganar 0 y después otro mes de ganar 20.000. Pero a la gente no le gusta esa estabilidad. Yeah. Entonces buscan estrategias que a nivel numérico no son positivas. Y eso es lo que él dice.
Sí,
o sea,
eso pasa.
Eso me gusta muchísimo. Es una reflexión que la gente debería darle. Y estoy seguro que gente, si simplemente entendiesen que esto es irregular y ajustasen los números a ello, podrían ser rentables. Y por intentar buscar esa regularidad, no, yo es que todos los días quiero hacer 5 trades y ganar al menos 3. Eso es condena. Tú no puedes decidir, eso no depende de ti.
The ones who can start to very quickly realize and listen to traders such as yourself and others out there who have actually gone through that journey and have the verified receipts to say, okay, well, every single verified receipt trader is saying the same message. Maybe I should take that on board. But in terms of the process of paying yourself in trading, how have you gone about that? Is that something you do on a, maybe less so now, but generally speaking through your journey, is that something you do on like a monthly basis, quarterly basis?
Yeah, so I would say a monthly. So at the end of the month, you kind of, like, I would say in the beginning, I'm just kind of taking out to pay like bills. But I would say weekly is too often because, like I said, like every week is different. So if you have a really good week, you make, $1,000. You withdraw the 1,000, the second week you lose $2,000. So now your account's much lower than it should be. So I would take it out less frequently just to see if like the strategy that you're doing is actually working, right? Because you could have a really good week, but that week probably everyone might have made money because it's easy week. But once a month, I would say, is a good benchmark to start at. And as you grow your account, you don't necessarily need to take it out as often.
Would you say that throughout your journey you experienced and noticed, as we talked about, like 1 or 2 months, those sort of periods being very common in terms of the highest P&L, like the large portion of P&L coming from a small selection of tickers or options?
También es muy importante, como dice, habla un poco de cuándo te pagas como trader, ¿no? Si estás empezando, pues verdad, tienes que pagar, porque cada semana, una semana ganas 1.000 y sacas 1.000 esa semana, a lo mejor
I would say in a given year, there's
yo creo que es muy importante que al principio no toques nada de dinero del
where the
trading,
market
que puedas
is
vivir
hot,
otra cosa
right? And if you can wait for those weeks to trade, which is hard, it's really hard, then that's where you make most of your money. Most of your money, I would say, in a year, it's off a handful of trades.
Let's take a break for a minute there, guys, because I want to tell you about...
Otra vez nos va a hacer una publicidad y yo, no vea, ¿no? Te estás forrando con todos los partners, ¿eh? Madre mía.
And the whole week was super, super slow. And the market opens at like 4:30 in the morning. So it's super early mornings. It's Thursday by that time. So that's 4 days of like grinding it out and the market's not moving. And so I bought 50,000 shares at like 40 something bucks. And within like 2 hours, 3 hours, the stock had a short squeeze. So that was my biggest trade. I ripped 2.7 million in 24 hours in one stock.
Really?
Yeah. So
and what goes through your mind when you go through something like that?
So it was interesting. So I bought the shares and then jumped in the shower and then I got out. I'm up like $700,000-800,000, and I was like, and I told my wife like, well, let's go grab lunch. So we go downtown, whatever, Maui, and we order fish and chips, and we're sitting at a bench. I look back at my phone, I'm up like 1.5 million. And emotionally, I'm like, I need to sell. Like, you're up. This is your biggest trade ever. And it was a weird moment where I was like, you shouldn't sell based on emotion.
Joder, no me pasa a mí eso, de cagarla, de vender, porque tú lo sabes, vaya. De decirte, Manu, acabo de salirme aquí, esta operación me va a dar 100k. Y
salirte con 5.000.
Salirte con 5.000, sí, con 7.000 o lo que sea.
Get overconfident or greedy or start to,
Ese primer impulso es el que tienes que parar.
Yeah, no, well, in that situation, I didn't. Do you remember when they kept halting the stock on the way down? So I got caught pretty badly on that. So I was buying shares and I just kept buying more as it got halted, but it kept going lower. And at one point, I was down like 1.3 million when they kept halting it, and you can't get out. But I kept buying more to where it actually bounced, and I got out like, made a decent amount, but like 100 and something thousand. But after being down that much,
relative to the risk, yeah.
So like it was a moment of like you have a lapse of judgment where you.
Was that after the big win?
That was after it. So you feel that like euphoria, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm up huge. So you kind of have a lapse of judgment where you get greedy, and that happened to me. But I thank God I got lucky, and I kept buying more, which is breaking another rule. But yeah, I couldn't control myself. So go back to your question. Yeah, I kind of just wanted more after that big win. So
have you found that happens in other areas as well, or is that something that happened and then you've learned from it and kind of try and avoid it in the future?
Yeah. No, I definitely learned from that. That was a moment where like you could have turned a good situation into a terrible one. So it's kind of traumatizing, I would say.
For sure, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But
¿Te ha pasado a ti, Manu, eso?
earlier we talked about how
yo al principio me pasaba que cuando ganaba una grande, al poco, y luego ya empecé a pensarlo, ¿vale? Digo, qué curiosidad, siempre que gano una grande, luego me vienen 3 días bastante malos.
Sí, claro que me ha pasado.
Digo, y ya cuando lo ves, ya que te pasa varias veces, tú pues cuando gano una grande, o bien me centro en hacerlo perfecto.
Porque dices, bueno, como he ganado esta grande, voy a meter este trade, que tengo colchón.
Yo es que no lo pensaba activamente, pero sí que lo hacía. Sin pensarlo activamente. No decía, he ganado aquí, voy a tal.
Claro, dices, bueno, voy a entrar en este trade, como tengo margen que he ganado esta operación, pues voy a meter aquí, ¿no?
Ya luego te das cuenta y te cortas más. Claro, pero sí.
Empiezas a perder operaciones que no deberías.
Eso es. Pero me gusta ver que a este tío le ha pasado también, he tenido que aprenderlo.
Can you talk to us about like a losing streak, a period of time maybe one of the longer ones?
Yeah.
That you experienced, and then one, the thoughts that were going through your mind, and two, how did you come out of that? What did you do? Did you have to make any changes?
Yeah. I would say 2022, when the market like really sold off, when a lot of stocks were down like 70, 80, 90%, there's probably like a 7-8 week stretch where it was very difficult to make any money. Like everything just kept going lower every week. So for me, the way that I trade is, let's say week 1, you take 20 trades and you win 17 out of 20, which is a great week. And then week 2, the market starts to shift a little, not much, and you win 14 out of 20. Still made money, no reason to change up the strategy. But then week 3 comes and things start to really get volatile, and you won 10 out of 20 trades. So on that week when I only won half my trades, that's when you start scaling down. And I'll scale down by at least 50-60% for that 4th week, right? And then you notice on week 4, you're taking, number 1, half the amount of trades, and then you're still losing. Let's say you win 5 out of 10. And from that point forward, you have to scale down even more. And I think that's what helps keep you in the game, being able to recognize when your strategy isn't working in the right environment.
Was there ever any moment in your trading career where you doubted yourself?
Oh, yeah. I would say all the time.
Really?
All the time. Yeah, even today. Right? Like Friday lost, I think it was more than 100 pips, keep you in the game. You're still losing. Let's say you win 5 out of 10. And from that point forward, you have to scale down even more. And I think that's what helps keep you in the game, being able to recognize when your strategy isn't working in the right environment.
Was there ever any moment in your trading career where you doubted yourself?
Oh, yeah. I would say all the time.
Really?
All the time. Yeah,
Pero eso
today,
pasa siempre.
right?
Tienes
like
que mirar
Friday
los datos para darte
lost,
cuenta que...
I think it was more than 120. But I think I sent you a video. You might have
Me
seen
gusta porque dice muchas cosas que en verdad uno siente,
or
¿sabes?
something. I forget. So, I mean, you're going to doubt yourself all the time because, like I said, the market is always changing and you have to have the ability to adapt. And me being 14 years in, you think, people think, oh, he's got it down. He figured it out. But you also have to think on the sense that, like, how many good years do I have left of, like, focusing every single day? You get what I mean? Yeah. So you're always going to doubt yourself, especially, like, I'm 34. There's kids coming up, 20, 21 years old, that are just crushing it. So I feel like I have to work even harder so I don't doubt myself. You get what I mean?
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. It's an interesting mindset. And You know, it's an interesting topic you brought up there in terms of.
Yo creo que esa
the
duda es
mindset
parte del
of how
trabajo.
long will I
Cargar
do
con
this,
esa duda es parte del trabajo.
focused every single day. Like, what are your thoughts with that? Do you have like an idea of when you would not maybe more? Do you think you would step away entirely?
It's hard, yeah. It's hard, because I love the idea of trading, just the competition, you know, facing against other, you know, retail traders and institutional, and just trying to be right. I think the idea of winning and the feeling of winning it's unmatched. And if you can do it and make a lot of money, in some sense it's addicting. So I love what I do. I think that it's a blessing to be able to actually just even trade for a living. So do I see myself stopping anytime soon? I don't think so, yeah.
It was never something I thought about in terms of traders sort of just stopping very early in terms of lifespan. Like they could continue for 10, 20, 30 years. Because I have met traders who've done that. They're like in their 70s and still trading, for example, which is insane. But it shows that, as you said, I think it is that competition. I think it is that unrivaled feeling of participating in the markets, win or lose, to be fair, but especially obviously when you win.
Yeah.
But then I met a trader recently who.
Cómo se lo pasan en sus flotadores, Qué felices son, Qué envidia me ha dado, tío. Qué buen rollazo tenía esa gente, tío.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. Multi 8 figures, closing in 9 figures, and that's what their choice was. Their choice was to essentially step away and retire very early from the trading game.
Hombre, ahí depende de qué es lo que te llene.
They're passionate about.
Claro.
Si estás en esto solo por pasta porque te gusta.
No, a ver, es lo que ha dicho, que te genera un poco un sentimiento adictivo de querer ganar más y querer estar más tiempo trabajando y llega un punto que no le vas a dedicar tantas horas como al principio.
Claro, a mí me pasa que yo creo que la satisfacción más guay que he tenido nunca, y he competido en el Tekken por el mundo, he ganado torneos por el mundo, he hecho cosas así guay, ¿no? Que he vivido cosas de dopamina a tope, pero como hacerte bien el mapa, que el precio haga lo que tú quieras, que llegue a donde tú estás esperando, que haga el engaño, que tal, que entres y que acabe justo tu recorrido, tu TP, donde tú has puesto el TP y la entrada perfecta y luego se gire. A mí yo creo que es lo que más feliz a nivel de currártelo, ¿sabes? En plan, es que me lo he currado muchísimo para llegar a este punto. Esa sensación es para mí lo adictivo. No el que sube el dinero o baja, que no el gambleo, no es la máquina tragaperra, sino el decir, coño, pero es como cuando a lo mejor te lo curran mucho en el gimnasio y llegas a unas marcas que hace X años para tipo de parecer muy chungo, ¿no? O cualquier persona que haya hecho algo en su vida que se lo ha tenido que currar muchísimo para llegar a ese conocimiento. Mira, por ejemplo, ahora a tocar 1.6, 1.8, me siento un gilipollas, ¿no? En este caso, ¿no? Porque jamás hubiese puesto el stop aquí.
Te ha sacado el break-even justo y se ha girado.
Es que jamás hubiese... No, es que mi break-even estaba más alto, mi break-even estaba aquí.
Es que, claro, no me has llamado al Discord. Estoy fuera.
Ah, no pasa nada, pero vamos, que ya está, que he puesto mal el stop, lo he puesto un poco más abajo y ahora se está girando un poquillo, ¿no? Pero que eso, que al final es que es un puzzle y mola mucho resolverlo. Entonces...
Dice Fernando que le metamos un blog de las publicidad a YouTube. Hombre, sí, pero también tiene que cobrar el creador.
Ahí va, tío. Yo soy partidario como tú.
Sí, pero bueno, a ver, yo es que hago vídeos en YouTube, pero a mí es la monetización. A mí YouTube creo que me paga 10 euros al mes, algo así.
Pero que yo no por eso, yo porque si el chico que vamos a llamarlo Carlitos a partir de ahora...
Pero tú piensas que si todo el mundo metiese un blog de YouTube...
¿No estaríamos viendo este vídeo?
Claro, el contenido de YouTube sería peor. O sea, no sería una mierda.
A mí me gusta.
Estaría lleno de... Como TikTok, de basura.
Yo me como los anuncios encantados.
De basura improductiva.
Yo me como los anuncios encantados por eso mismo, tío. Me ha gustado que pienses también así.
Well, and even this year they were meant to kind of step away, but got drawn in by the volatility and the
Fer, quitar el unblock.
But drawn in by the volatility and the opportunity still, and performed very well. But yeah, like they want to step away because they said the lifestyle of trading for them in particular, and I'm sure it might be similar for yourself as well, is like when those opportunities are there and you have to be active and you have to be quick, your day-to-day lifestyle is terrible. Like you probably sleep way less. The amount of mental energy and fatigue
Puede ser, no lo sé, no conozco las finanzas de Carlito.
handling all the other
Si
things
pilla algo
that
de
you have to
YouTube,
handle
se
in
lo lleve,
day-to-day life. I think he doesn't enjoy that aspect of it anymore, and he prioritizes or has a stronger emphasis on those things now in terms of his priority list, so that therefore he's made more than enough from the markets, so therefore was going to step away. Is that a thought process you think you would have, or what do you think to that?
Yeah, I think maybe when I have kids, I think that my mindset could change. Maybe I want to spend more time with them, which I should probably.
Don't say that to me. I've left my kids for a month to do these podcasts.
So, yeah, I would say it's hard because I have only known trading.
Yeah.
Right. I've been doing it since very late teenager. So I don't know what else I would do. Right. But yeah, as of this
Claro,
moment,
tener niños tiene que
still
ser
a
un
little
game
bit,
changing
yeah,
para gente que
it kind
trabaja
of
de
wakes me
cosas
up in the morning,
muy...
and I'm ready
Para
to go
todo,
every
pero si
day.
encima ya trabajas de algo
great.
24/7,
In terms
rollo
of
trading...
early on,
¡buah!
like you started very early, as you said, 19 years old. Like, what was it about the markets that got you intrigued in the first place?
Nada, estamos viendo este
Yeah,
vídeo...
Sí,
was
además
in
tienes
undergrad,
el
and I had
directo
a friend,
anterior,
his name
porque
was
se nos ha cortado el
Edwin,
directo antes.
and we
Sí,
were
puedes
both
ver
on
al
track
principio.
to
Sí, hemos
grad
comentado un
school.
poco los mercados y en
Kind of
este
like
segundo
pre-med.
directo no estamos
And,
comentando este podcast.
we're in
Que te lo
class,
puedes
and he's
poner
always
desde el
on his
principio
phone,
y lo vas viendo.
one day I just asked him, like, what are you doing on your phone? He's like, I trade options. I just made $300 a day. And, I was the kid in college where I'm buying Domino's pizza for $5.99 for 2 mediums, and I'm trying to stretch that out as long as it can last. So, like, me hearing, this kid just made $300, I asked him to teach me. He kind of showed me the ropes, and I started just looking at charts, right? There was a stock called American Apparel back in the day. And I think it was a penny stock, but I saw it go from like $1 to $2, and I'm like, wow, if I put 100 grand in, if I had it, I could make 100 grand in like a year. And then to me, I was like, why am I in school if I can figure this out, then I don't need to be here anymore. So he graduated, went to med school, became a doctor, and then I graduated. I took the MCAT, graduated, but I did not pursue med school.
De momento no.
Yeah. So, and when
¿Cómo
I
lo ves
decided
estos
not
precios?
to
No
go
lo
to med
veo
school,
mal.
I didn't even have any money. I had a few $1,000. So
lo he
I'm
dicho antes,
working.
que si,
I worked as a
que si
painter.
alguno quiere comprar alguna
I
altcoin,
worked as
que
a
la única
dishwasher,
que compraría sería
and saved up money while trading, and just kind of slowly built it up. And
Pero yo
I hit
pienso
some.
que va a dar mejores oportunidades.
There was a
también.
stock called
Pero no está mal
Innovio
punto para comprar.
Pharmaceuticals. That was one of my big hits. It was like a biotech stock. They did like hepatitis vaccines or something. And then Bank of America was another one where I hit a big trade on that, and that kind of pushed me to like not towards 6 figures yet, but much bigger than 6 grand.
Yeah, definitely. And what was that like? Obviously, not having sort of capital. What was your period of time before you could go full time, fully trading?
I would say by my 3rd year, I made $1 million.
Really?
Yeah. So no one that knows me personally knows that. But yeah, I made my first million. I was about 22, 23. So that's new to anyone listening.
Solo porque no se le haya ido la cabeza, tío.
So I would say
Tiene un mérito
by
que flipa.
22 and a half, 23, I was like pretty confident to be full time. And back then that was a lot of money. $1 million at 23, like before the inflation,
$1 a los
was a lot of
23.
money. So
Hace 10 años, ¿eh? Hace 10 años, ¿eh? No ahora.
it's scary when that happened.
Pero sí, hombre, a ver, $1 millón hace 10 años no vas a notar la diferencia. Se te va igual.
Sí, sí, claro, te da igual. Es decir, si te vas a convertir en un gilipollas, te conviertes en un gilipollas igual. Quiero decir, si te pira la cabeza y empiezas a hacer cosas raras y empiezas a... Pero...
Con 23 años, a ver, yo con 23 años ya ganaba dinero bien. Y no se me llegó a ir
Del todo.
Del todo.
Del
A mí
todo.
siempre se me ha ido un poquito.
Pero antes del dinero.
Sí.
También. O sea, no ha sido por eso.
Pero yo creo que $1 millón hubiese cambiado. No lo sé.
Es que no lo puedes saber.
Uf,
Y con 23 años no lo puedes saber.
Es que no lo sé, claro. Claro, no es lo mismo estar ganando, no sé, 2.000, 3.000 al mes con 22 que empezar a ganar 20, 30...
Pero igualmente, es que te entiendo, pero es que tendría que ser 100K, 80K al mes, como habría estado
Bueno,
en ese
sí.
tío durante un año.
Es
Sí,
muy complicado. O sea,
muy
sí,
complicado.
yo
A
creo
ver,
que-
yo creo que a toda la gente joven, cuando ves que te entra tanto,
¿Sabes qué pasa?
la
Que
puedes cagar.
yo con 23 años estaba haciendo atletismo, entonces eso me frenaba mucho. Pero una persona que no haga... Y yo hubiese seguido con el atletismo y me hubiese mantenido en orden con mis rutinas, mis horarios y no se me hubiese ido. Pero una persona que no esté con un deporte ahí entrenando de alto nivel, Yo ya te digo, si no hubiese estado haciendo atletismo, sí me hubiese ido, pero con lo que estaba ganando, con 2.000, 3.000 euros al mes.
No te hacía falta mucho.
No me hacía falta mucho más, Sí, hubiese muy mal,
Sí.
Yo creo,
Pero yo creo que este estaba muy centrado en el trading y le daba bastante igual la pasta.
Ya.
Because you think you
igual,
are
¿no?
on top of the world. You think that,
¿O no?
No, yo soy un santo, tío.
Ya.
Yo soy un santo.
Sí.
you're invincible, right? And I was spending the money when that happened. Inflation, it was a lot of money, so. But it's scary when that happened because you think you are on top of the world. You think that you're invincible, right? And I was spending the money so fast.
Really?
Oh yeah, like going out, clothes, jewelry, watches, this, that, you name it. I was in that lifestyle, kind of like, you know, like
entonces, coño, si se le fue un poco, cabrón. Compraba.
No sé, yo qué sé, no me ha dado tiempo a saber si se le iba o no, tío. Ha sido un poco, como lo veo ahí sentadito tan chill, digo, este no se lo habrá ido, tío. Pero sí, un puto chalao, el loco este. un puñetero chalao, A ver qué dice, a lo mejor se compra un reloj y no sé qué. No empezó a contratar enanos para tirarlos a la piscina, cosas que me quería cagar. Lo digo por el barrio, un amigo mío que es streamer y youtuber también, que ese es su sueño.
Like full time.
Ya lo conocerás seguro.
During that journey, all the way up till 2021, I was pretty secretive about my life of trading because my family thought I was going to go to med school.
Bro, ibas con el reloj de 200.000 pavos y le decías a tu madre que era un Casio o qué. ¿Cómo hacías la jugada? Ahora quiero hablar con él.
Los padres pensando que era narco, que pasaba... que pasaba...
Yo creo que era mejor que pensasen que era narco que pensasen que era trader, Creo que a los padres le molestaría menos, ¿Por qué te quedas en casa todo el día abriendo short, hijos, porque no sales a la puñetera calle? Eso es lo que le dijo la madre.
My parents were always like, what are you doing at home all day? Why do you stay at home all day? Like, what are you doing? And
¿Por qué te quedas en casa? Sí, mira, ¿Por qué te quedas en casa todo el día?
Trying to make money, this and that, and they couldn't understand it. You know, they're from Vietnam. They were born in Vietnam, so there's a big like culture difference between here in America, there in America. So 2021 is when I kind of revealed to my parents, like, okay, you know, I flew them out to Vegas, and I'm like, okay, here's the life I live, and you know, I paid off everything for my mom. They're retired now, but yeah, I kept it secret for a long time.
What was their response when they?
I mean, they couldn't believe it. Yeah, like I mean, well, at the time I had a Lamborghini, you know, different cars, like watches, like, you know, multiple homes. So their jaw dropped essentially, because like I was so secretive about it, like because no one in the beginning wanted to hear about it.
Of course,
you know what I'm saying.
That's how it goes. Yeah,
everyone's against it.
Fíjate, esto que ha dicho, yo creo que es bueno. Yo también lo mantuve en secreto, sí. Yo no decía nada. De hecho, mis padres, mi familia no sabe ni cuánto gano, ni cuánto dejo de ganar, ni siquiera a qué me dedico exactamente, algunos, Yo en ese sentido soy muy reservado, porque cuanto menos digas a los demás, incluso a tu entorno, esto es lo típico, te pueden incluso poner el palo en la rueda, impedirte,
Sí, no, a ver, yo tengo la suerte de que desde siempre mi madre, yo dije a mi madre, mamá quiero jugar al Tekken, mamá quiero jugar al póker, y mi madre decía, bueno, pues le va bien, pues que haga la presa de los huevos, ¿sabes? Pero es cierto que, bueno, con mi entorno muy cercano, mi amigo muy cercano, 2 amigos, y sí, pero es que también es muy difícil de explicar, y también es muy difícil de... porque es que es muy, ¿sabes? Pero bueno, ya como por ejemplo, ya te vienes a lo mejor a Bali, a una villa, no sé qué, ven fotos, esto, lo otro...
Ya ahí sí.
Ya, claro.
Claro, pero es que ahí ya has alcanzado, digamos...
Sí, el vivir de eso estable.
El éxito. Pero si estás empezando, si estás ahí que no arrancas, ¿qué tal? Tú cállate, no digas nada. Tú
yo he pecado a veces de compartir mis cosas, y a veces es más chungo. Compartir las cosas al principio, digo...
Que las campanas suenan, pero no hacen nada. ¿Sabes lo que te digo o no?
Mira cómo estoy pidiendo la pasta, tío. Estás invocándolo,
¿Sabes lo que te digo o no sabes lo que te digo, Que las campanas suenan pero no hacen nada. ¿Sabes quién decía eso, no?
¿Quién?
El Petit Riveri.
¡Ah, hostia! Pero eso hace muchísimo tiempo, ¿no?
Fíjate, el Petit River.
Éramos pequeñicos.
Espérate, lo voy a buscar.
¿Qué le gusta a Manuel Trading?
Un meme.
¿Qué le gusta a Manuel Trading? Un meme.
Lo que más.
Mira, se ha autocompletado, tú.
Solo necesitas el nombre de tu...
Es que es muy buena esa, ¿eh? Que las campanas suenan, pero
Sí,
no
ni me
dicen
acordaba,
nada.
tío.
Campanas
pero
suenan,
ni me acordaba, vaya.
pero no hacen nada. A ver.
Habla David.
No, es que está... No está el corto. No, da igual.
Es demasiado largo, ¿no?
Sí. Pero bueno, eso, chavales. Tú a lo callado, que las campanas suenan pero no hacen nada.
You think you're going to make money doing that? And I think the feeling of success after everyone says that to you, there's nothing like it. It's unmatched.
Why didn't you drop out of med school? Or you didn't go to
I
med
didn't-
school, sorry? But
yeah.
did the...
Yeah.
What was
So,
the
so I was an
diploma you did?
undergrad.
The undergrad, yeah.
yeah.
So why didn't you drop out when you first heard about trading?
Because I was still learning, yeah. I was like halfway.
Espera, ¿que se hizo
through,
médico?
So I only got 2 years
No,
left, and
estudiaba
like, I think
medicina.
it would have been like even more crazy for
Espera.
my parents to hear that. You know, that I think they would be like so stressed. But
The reason I ask you that, though, is simply because I've come across traders, independent traders, and people who are into trading, and they're in that position. They're at university. I think it's the equivalent of college here, and they're a year in, year and a half in, sometimes 2 years in. Sometimes only got a year left, and they say to me, whether it's on DMs or I've met them in person, or other people, speak to other people, etc. And they say to me, I'm going to drop out because I want to give more time to trading. Yet no results or anything. But I want to drop out. It's not for me.
yeah,
And I've always not. I understand the passion, the drive. You want to succeed at something, but equally, it's like if you're already there and you've only got X amount of time left, like why not just complete that?
Yeah.
Because you can learn trading, on the side as well as that.
Pues yo
Especially
eso
if
no
there's no
entiendo, tío.
results. There's no really reason to drop. That's why I asked you. Yeah, that's why I asked you with that. What was the mindset of not continuing to med school then? Because at that point you
Es
hadn't
que no entiendes.
made
Tío,
money from trading just
si
yet, right?
eres
Yeah,
trader
so
o si
learning-
eres lo que sea y te está yendo bien y le ves futuro, al final, si tú estás haciendo trading en el año 4 y estás ganando pasta
Sí.
y estás estudiando medicina o estás haciendo cualquier otro estudio,
Yo-
quítate, tío.
Sí, yo
O
también
sea,
pienso así.
porque si en el año 4 te va ok, cuando lleves 3 años más de experiencia te va a ir muchísimo mejor. En plan, no vas a ser médico, tío, eres trader o eres lo que sea, ¿sabes? O te has puesto a hacer te pones a cocinar y eres un cocinero
Bueno,
de
al
puta
final
madre.
yo dejé lo que estaba estudiando al final.
Claro, tío. Claro, si es que yo lo veo bien. Yo no lo que no puedo entender.
El problema está en si todavía no generar de eso, que dejes lo que estés haciendo.
Hombre, por supuesto que no. Voy a
Claro.
dejar el trading, voy a dejar mi carrera a falta de 2 años porque quiero ser trader.
O
no,
voy a dejar mi carrera para grabar vídeos en YouTube y crear contenido. Pues no,
ponte,
no,
ponte
chaval.
a crear y si estás ganando a lo mejor 1000 y pico pavos al mes, coño, ya puedes empezar a plantear a dejarlo cuando. Porque si estás ganando 1000 y pico pavos al mes yendo a medio gas, si te pone 24/7,
prueba 6 meses, un año
Claro.
y juégatela. Ahí sí lo veo. Es lo que hay que hacer.
Sí, pero esa peña, ¿no? Es que soy trader, tal y cual, gano 50.000 pavos todos los meses y mientras me estoy sacando una ingeniería. Como.
A ver, pero eso ya lo puedes hacer por.
No,
porque
si
te
quieres
gusta.
hacerlo porque te gusta, sí.
Claro.
Pero no, es que
Como
como,
el
ya,
que
me,
va,
como
no
ya
sé.
me metí en la ingeniería y me quedan 2 años, lo tengo que terminar. Para mí es muy raro eso.
Ya,
Y es
eso
como,
claro,
tío,
sí.
estás ganando 10.000 pavos, 5.000 pavos, 4.000 pavos al mes de manera estable y te gusta. No, es que como mis padres me la pagaron a empezar, pues ya me la tengo que sacar. Eso son cosas que, pero bueno, cada uno.
process.
it was tough because so I was like dating a girl like at the time too, and like she
No listo este, ¿eh?
came from
No te salta un
relatively
tren, ¿eh,
like,
Guillo?
good family, like well off, and they were expecting me to go to school.
A ver, dice, escuchando el podcast y ustedes que llevan más tiempo que muchos de nosotros, ¿cómo hacen para no perder tanto la cabeza cuando se llega a perder algo de dinero? Pues es que depende mucho de tu aversión al riesgo y del apego que tengas por el dinero. Entonces, claro.
A ver,
Y sobre todo, primero lo que tienes que saber son tus números.
saber tus números,
Porque si no estás...
perder cantidades que puedas perder y entender que necesitas perder dinero. Es decir, es que no vas a...
Claro,
es como
pero-
querer jugar al fútbol sin cansarte. ¿No? Es que tienes que perder dinero. Es que vas a perder
No,
dinero.
claro, tienes que tocar stop loss, no se puede ganar siempre.
Claro.
Pero tienes que tener claros los números, porque puede
Sí.
que estés utilizando un sistema, un método, o te estés saliendo de tu gestión del riesgo y
Claro.
vayas a quebrar la cuenta.
Es que es muy importante.
Entonces eso ya sería ludopatía, no trading.
Claro, es muy importante que tengas unos números hechos y los respetes
Y
siempre.
diferenciar si lo que estás buscando en cada trade es una satisfacción personal de dopamina, de segregar dopamina con cada trade abriéndolo, o estás siguiendo una estrategia a largo plazo.
El problema muchas veces de la gente que se come los stop loss o que la lía con los números es porque no quiere dejar de sentir eso. Quiere alargar el trade para ver si se gira, para ver si no sé qué, porque busca esa emoción, busca tal. Pero es que el trading yo creo que tiene que ser, cuando lo haces bien, tiene que ser aburrido. Quiero decir, tiene que no darte ese subidón que la gente tiene a veces o eso. Claro, ese subidón sí, la operación va muy bien y te da mucha pasta, pues obviamente ahí te va a dar un subidón. Pero no tiene. Si cada vez que estás abriendo operaciones te está dando ese puntito chungo, chungo digo de que te gusta o de que te metes en el mercado y te emociona, yo creo que eso es malo.
Dice Víctor que dice Manu se lo pasa mal, mira el primer directo porque se le fue la operación. No, la operación se fue y me dio rabia por no haberla cazado.
Joder, claro, eso joder.
En directo.
Claro, eso joder, es como si a mí ahora esto que me ha saltado estos lobs, yo sé que lo he hecho más,
sí,
se
pero
va para abajo, me va a dar por coraje.
Me jodió más por no haberla cazado en el directo.
Claro, sí, claro, sí te entiendo.
Then ended up like breaking things off with her because like they can't see the vision. Yeah, well, I guess it was a vision at the time, but they couldn't see like the dream, like what I wanted to really do. So, yeah, it was tough. It's tough when only you see it, right? And
what got you through that period then?
I think just believing in myself. I always daydream. It's like nowadays they call it like visualization and manifestation, but I was always a daydreamer. I always kind of saw myself in a life where I had everything I wanted, right? And I always was like that ever since I was a kid. I always daydream. And am I surprised to have everything I have now? Yes and no. Because I always thought I'd be here. I didn't know how, but I always thought I'd get what I wanted.
I was always kind of naive growing up in terms of, even to this day to be fair, but I always think like everyone kind of has a similar mindset, and everyone sort of believes in themselves, want the best for themselves and the best for others and so on and so forth. And as we get older, we come into more contact with more different people and, you realize that's not the case, unfortunately. But, yeah, it's quite rare, to have that sort of mindset of self-belief by the sounds of it because of all the people I've interacted with. It's quite a unique trait, but one that I believe is definitely necessary. Because as you said, it's not about how you do it. It's just knowing that that's what you want to create and achieve eventually. And then what's a big component of that, though? So that when you started to go through your learning process, how meticulous, how strong was your work ethic? How much work were you putting in those early days to actually then get to a point where 3 years in you're making $1 million?
Yeah. So trading hours is about 6.5 hours a day. So that's standard. That's what you need to do. But after hours, you're kind of spending at least, for myself, about 4 hours, 5 hours sometimes a day reading news and studying charts and reviewing your trades. And this is still something I do to this day, not the same amount of hours, but I wanted to be the best when I was younger. I said to myself, if people can click these buttons and you see these stocks like Apple go from 10x over the past 10 years, like why can't I be rich like that? Like if people are doing it. So my work ethic is, I think it's unbeatable. I think especially as I get older, there's a lot of competition and I want to remain sharp. And when I was 19, 20 years old, I'm the same exact person. I'm just a little older, but everything, the way I operate, I either try my best or I don't do it.
Yeah. How important is it to be able to achieve success in trading, to have that meticulous process and be putting in that time and effort?
Yeah. You need it, right? If you want to be the best and you want to be on top of the game and you want to have long-term sustainable success, you have to put in the work. There's no such thing as easy money. There's a term, easy money. It doesn't exist, right? People, like when they look at me or anyone that's successful, sometimes they say he got lucky or they got lucky or it was great timing to enter this industry or enter this trade or whatever it is. And I think when people say that, they're kind of downplaying what it actually takes to become successful. So if you want to get to a certain level, you have to put in the work. There's no way around that.
Say if there's someone right now who's a year in, let's say on average, and then they're not quite seeing as much progress as they want to be. what would you recommend to them in terms of like how they should be running their day, and the things that they should be doing to really start to scale that progress and their knowledge base?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is like, even being a year in, you have to be patient with yourself enough to see yourself develop. Most people will quit after like 6 months. So even being a year in, that's still something worth
Esa presión siendo un orinas.
Because most people will give up well before a year, like 3 months in, 6 months in. It could be a week, they blow up an account and they're done. They said they changed the scam. So being a year in, you have a year's worth of data, right? You have all these trades that you took, probably more losing trades than winning. So if you can look at your losing trades and see what actually went wrong, meaning you should have a list of trading rules, right? You should have rules that you never break, right? And it can be a stop loss, right? It can be certain environments. It could be trade size, right? If you're breaking these rules, like averaging down, there's all types of rules. If you're breaking most of these rules on, let's say, 50% of the trades, then you have a lot of information in front of you to where you know you need to correct this. And the thing with most traders is they don't like to look at their losing trades because it's painful, right? No one wants to think they're a loser, and no one wants to look themselves in the mirror and have to face, all these like pages and pages of losing trades. It's difficult, and that's to me why most people can't get better, is because they don't do that. They look at the winning trades and say, okay, I'll stick to these. But you have all these bad habits that you need to actually work on first and correct before you can get to that next level. And yeah, like averaging down is like, I would say, one of the biggest things that people do that really hurts you. And, even for me, it's hurt me a lot.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of reviewing trades, is there any specific metrics you think that are important for a trader to be identifying and looking over?
I would say kind of like what we talked about before is like, there's certain times a day where you do best in. And for me, I would say the first 2 hours of the day is like my bread and butter. That's where I enter. I might exit after that 2 hour window, but knowing when to enter, I think, is extremely important. You can always work on your exit, like in terms of, are you going to scale out or exit completely in one lot? But knowing when to enter and when you do best is everything. Because there's people that shouldn't be trading at lunchtime, right? Mm-hmm. For the West Coast, it's 9 a.m. Pacific. So between like 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., typically the market's a little slower. And I know people that try to just trade all day long. And that window of time is when they typically either break even or they lose a little. But if you look at that over a year period, you calculate how much you've lost, whatever the number is. Mm-hmm. You could have made like 80 grand, 100 grand more that year, or 200 grand, whatever it is. So knowing when you should be trading is everything, because people can't handle the volatility sometimes between 6:30 a.m. and 8:30. So don't trade that window. Wait until it settles down a little and then jump in your trade.
Do you still journal your trades even now?
Yeah. I journal my trades.
Why is that important even now?
You want to see what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong all the time, because what worked one week may not work the next week, and you want to see the data behind that too. Like, I have been logging my trades for, not since all the way in the beginning, probably have 10 years worth on an Excel sheet with like the entries, the exits, the reason for the trade, the ticker, the stock, everything. So
lleva un registro de tus entradas, de tu salida, de por qué has entrado, por qué has salido, porque muchas veces pasa que tienes 4 o 5 tipos de entradas y una de ellas te da mucho más problemas. Puedes intentar mejorarla o quitarla directamente.
Yeah, sort of things you're doing.
Yeah, you kind of like reminisce, and like some weeks are terrible, like it's just all red sometimes. yeah, so it kind of brings back memories.
Definitely. Yeah. I can imagine. How often are you reviewing generally, like more recent stuff? Like, do you do it on the weekly basis, quarterly basis, monthly basis?
I'll review every day. Like after the market closes, I'll just kind of look at what I took that day and see like, am I following my rules? Did I go outside of that window? And make sure that I'm not going down like a route of just new bad habits, because it's easy to fall off the wagon and just start trading because you're up and just trading to see action. And I try to make sure I'm not falling into that common pitfall of just being in a trade just to see action.
Yeah. In terms of your rules, I know you said obviously time, and I'm sure obviously the stocks that you're selecting, but is there any other rules that you must follow each day when you are trading?
one big one that I have done lately is not oversizing, because as your account gets bigger, you want to see more profit. You want to sometimes you want that rush of being in a big trade and hitting a big one. So I have a rule where I don't go above a certain amount.
What's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? If you're checking your phone, instead try this technique from the mind.
And it's a hard rule to follow because it's tempting to size up. So that's a big one that's going to save you, especially as your account grows.
Do you grade your setups at all? Do you have like a hierarchy of setups, like something that's an A+ setup or not?
That's a good question. So I only take A+ setups. Like I won't enter a trade unless I think it's a good trade. I know people do that grading, but I don't see a point of taking like a C setup. Like why be in the trade in the first place? So I try my best to think I only wait for A+.
Es una forma de entenderlo.
How often would you say on average you're trading? Like how many trades would you say you're taking?
Solo cojo las super buenas, pero
yeah,
las que no son
so
super buenas
on
también te
average
las
in a
cuenta.
month, I'm probably taking about 75 to 80 trades. Yeah. It's about 50.
So they would all be A+.
Depende de lo que entiendas, pues las súper buenas, claro. Es que eso de las...
Claro, las AMAs que llaman, ¿no? Son como cuando, por ejemplo, ves muy claro cuando la liquidación esta masiva que hubo de 80 y pico
pero
mil.
si él quiere operar así...
Sí, lo entiendo, ¿vale? Lo entiendo perfectamente. Y claro, a mí me gustan mucho más las operaciones donde tengo 7 confluencias de zona que las que tengo 2. Porque las de 7 confluencias de zona me va a hacer más feliz y me va a dar más pasta. Pero claro, ¿qué ocurre? Que si solo coges
a lo
esa...
mejor una vez cada 3 meses.
Claro, no, más o menos yo una de esas que la pillé una vez al mes. Bueno, por ejemplo, la de marzo que era la 77 no la cogí.
I like to think so, yeah. So I've been doing the trading service for about over 6 years, and as of today, I've probably logged over 6,500 trades, and my win percent is like 74% or something, 73, 74%. So I like to think that I wait for the best trades, and people that know me, people that have been with me, they can kind of attest to that too.
Is that a regular amount of trades? It sounds like a lot, but then is that something that is quite common in options trading?
Yeah. It just depends on the trader, right? Like I trade a lot of weekly options, so you buy on Monday, expires on Friday. So it just depends on the trader, right? Like if you, for example, like when Tesla broke 414, that all-time high, it went to 488 shortly after, and it gives you the ability to trade multiple strikes in the same week.
Okay.
So like Tesla breaks 414, you take the 425 call, right? It gets to 425, you sell it, you roll to a new strike, 435 call. So that trade alone could be worth like 7, 8 trades.
Okay,
Does that make sense? Versus like people thinking like, oh, he's 80 trades, it's 80 different stocks or 80. It could be like 5 or 6 of the same stock for one 5, 6 different trades for one stock.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how many stocks would you say you would have in play at one time? Would you have multiple that you'll be trading within the same week?
Yeah, so like in terms of open positions, probably like 3 or 4 at a time,
el porcentaje que le gana al trade.
And then if the trade works, I'll roll it.
Confirmaciones o confluencias de su estrategia que tiene a la hora de entrar.
Yeah, and then that's how it adds up.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Más que lo que te aporte si...
Because there is one trader, for example, who I'll be doing a podcast with later in the tour, and they have like hundreds. I don't think they're in options. I think they're in multiple markets actually, but they'll have hundreds of positions open across the board, which is something that's quite unique. I can't imagine. And the day to day, then they're just managing positions.
That's good.
But I think they probably have like a very long term sort of more view on the market.
Aquí son ya las 5:20
So
de la
be
mañana.
interested to see that. Be interested to have a talk about that. But that's the one thing I've found with trading is like there is no right way, like a right definition way, like because if there was, then everyone would just do that, right? How important was it for you to sort of create your unique style and focus on what worked for you versus maybe something that had worked for someone else and you're trying to copy it?
Yeah. So I would say in the beginning you're gonna try like 10, 20 different strategies, learn from different people, but finding your edge that matches your risk appetite and your trading personality is everything. Because if you don't have a big risk appetite, then maybe you shouldn't trade weekly options, and you have to understand that about yourself. Because there's people that I know, people that signed up to trade with me that don't have a high risk appetite, and they're trying their best to trade like 0 DTE, and same week expiration, and it just doesn't work. Versus if you don't have a large risk appetite, you should trade monthlies or trade 2 months out or just buy shares. And you have to recognize that about yourself before you
Lo que ha dicho es muy importante,
pick one strategy.
Si tú no tienes apetito por el riesgo, no vas a ser buen day trader y te puede venir mejor operación de swing o a largo plazo, y eso tienes que identificarlo también.
Sí, es una cosa que yo hablo mucho con los alumnos que tengo, en plan, es que tú no tienes que hacer lo que yo hago. Yo te puedo ayudar a descubrir qué es lo que te puede gustar eso, pero cada persona es una persona.
Y hay un chico que entró conmigo de los primeros en 2019 y él el del trading dice que en algún momento llega y se le va, que ve que no es superior a él, que pierde, que tal, y empieza a arriesgar más, empieza ese sentimiento de venganza malo y ha probado a empezar de nuevo, a dejarlo, a probar, y siempre le ha pasado lo mismo. Y este año empezó a hacer más operaciones swing trading, inversión a largo plazo, y le va bien.
Claro, si es que cambia mucho eso. Yo, por
en
ejemplo,
lugar de hacer 1 o 2 o 3 operaciones al día, hace una operación cada 2 semanas. Y mira a diario, H4, y dice que perfecto. Hasta ahora.
Claro, pero eso es súper importante, que va contigo. Yo, por ejemplo, noto que para mí me viene mucho mejor el tema scalping, tío. Es lo que más me gusta y lo que más me tal. Pero cada persona al final tiene su movida.
You can't be exactly the way
Por eso pienso que copiar a alguien 100% no es bueno nunca.
And expect to get rich. You have to really objectively analyze who you are and what your actual potential is.
Is there anything that you could maybe point towards or advise for people to be able to do that sort of process to work out where they're at?
Yeah, I would say you have to ask yourself, what's your pain threshold in terms of when you lose money? Like, if you have a $25,000 account, let's say you lose 10 grand, how would that make you feel? Right? And if it's a terrible feeling and it would ruin you, and you get sick to your stomach, then you know that you have a long road ahead of you. Versus when I had 25 grand, I've lost 10 grand. It's a substantial part of my net worth. I always thought I'll make it back. Like, this is a learning lesson and I'll make it back. I always try to find like a silver lining in every situation. Even when I lost 1.5 at one point, and when I was down 1.5, I'm like, okay, we'll figure it out if it's a realized loss, right? Or April 2023, I was down 1.5. I always tell myself I'll make it back, right? But if you can't be in that mentality and you don't have a risk appetite, then it's difficult, right? It's difficult to just be like the type of trader.
Have you always been that way?
I've always been that way.
Always been that way.
Yeah, and it's just not like with trading, like anything that happens externally. I always try to find like a silver lining and just try to think positive.
Is there anything you feel like that comes from somewhere, or is it just...
At Creo Legal, we're dealing with contracts daily with Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant.
Something you naturally feel like you have?
I just think that it's, when I first started, it was so difficult to kind of live my life like openly, where I had to just always kind of think for myself and just kind of like survival mode in some sense. And you kind of have to develop a positive mentality if you want to, go down this journey of pursuing like your dream essentially. So I think it's important to do that because you're going to lose a lot in trading and you have to always be positive. I think it's really important.
Is there anything that you feel like traders should know about if they're starting to perform well? So right now we've spoken a lot more on the beginning section, right? But let's say you're in that intermediate section, you're starting to hit towards the 7 figures mark or multiple, maybe higher 6 figures. And the goal is to hit the 8s and hopefully maybe even beyond. Was there anything that will happen in your journey, maybe some sort of challenge, something that you had to overcome, something that really helped you to make that transition?
Yeah,
that traders out there you think they should know?
I think that once you get to the close to 7 figures, you should realize that at this point it's just a numbers game. It's the scalability is, you don't need to change really what you're doing. You just need to make sure you stay in the same type of trades. Because if you're scaling from whatever 10 grand or 100 grand and you're getting close to $1 million, nothing should change in what you're doing except taking just a little bit larger size trades. Like for me, when I started scaling up, it was very gradual. right? It wasn't like, okay, I'm at $1 million, now I'm going to go 3x of my normal size. It should be very, very gradual to where you almost don't notice you're scaling up. So like the past like 2 or 3 years of my trading, like I made more in the past year and a half, 2 years than I did the first 12 years of trading.
Really?
But the process was so gradual, like you don't even notice. It's weird. It's a weird thing.
Is that like that compounding effect?
Y también te lo va pidiendo el
all
cuerpo.
your time
En plan,
experience as
cuando
well as
aumentas la cuenta.
being able to scale, you know, through your account. In terms of risk, though, like how do you define your risk? Is it a percentage base? Is it just a dollar amount?
It's I would say it's a dollar amount. For example, like I would say my max size on a trade would probably be like 250,000. But it ranges. It just depends on the day of the week and like the setup, I guess. But like the trade size could range from like 25 all the way to 250. But
really,
yeah, it just depends on the trade.
What would define that?
Like for example, if it's a Friday and I'm taking like we call it like a lotto trade because it's gonna expire soon, you're putting in like 25, probably less, like 15 to 25,000, and see if the trade works. But if it's like a prime setup where the stock's about to break out, I mean, you have to take a shot, right? And I'll do 250 as max risk. Yeah.
So would you say, in essence, maybe you don't grade them by the traditional sense, or what a lot of people say in terms of like A plus and C, but you do have a form of scaling risk depending on the setup. So it's almost, in a way, a similar thing.
Yeah. I guess there's a different way of looking at it. So
because as you mentioned, like when the market's hot and in play, that's a very short amount of period, you know, in the year, and it happens a few times a year.
¿Qué porcentaje del tiempo tú te lo sabes?
I think the premise of having
lateralizado el mercado en comparación al tiempo que está en tendencia.
Sorry, the different grades for your trades is so that, as you mentioned earlier, like why would you take
poquísimo,
a
¿verdad?
I think the mindset.
O sea, quiero decir, la tendencia
es muy corta.
Muy corta. La lateralización es muy larga, ¿verdad?
Sí, un 80% a lo mejor. 80-20, la ley de Pareto es.
Sí, pues mira, algo así. Claro, al final.
Muy cerca de eso.
You take the C setup and the B setup and the A, so that when the A star does finally come along, you know, the few times that it does, you actually have made money off those other setups. That allows you then to size up and really maximize that A star when it comes along. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah, yeah. That definitely can work. Like in different markets, like it could be like a B or C like market condition, and you kind of have to recognize that and just take what you can from the market, whatever the market's offering to you. And then, like you said, when there's momentum and it's A plus environment, yeah, you take all those profits and you flip it essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in terms, like, you've been trading for 14 years now, and in that time, the markets have changed, different rotations. Yeah, how important is it? As you did mention earlier, obviously being able to pivot is very important, but what are the key things you've had to do when the markets have shifted? You know, going from a bull market to a bear market, going from you know, really strong consolidation for long periods of time. Like, what things do you have to adapt to change, if any? You know, when
Cuando te dije, no sé, te acordarás seguro. Cuando te dije, joder, Manuel, si ahora empezásemos a operar a favor de tendencia.
Dices, claro, con.
Cuando empezó la subida.
Digo,
si empezásemos ahora mismo, pero a favor de tendencia, en unos meses seríamos multimillonarios, ¿eh? Y no lo hicimos, ¿eh? Y lo hubiésemos sido, ¿eh?
Bueno, a ver, pero es que yo estaba posicionado también en spot.
Sí, en spot, sí. Entonces, no, pero qué gracia me hizo, tío, porque cuando lo vimos un mes después nos hinchamos de reír, tío. Y también lo dijimos antes, ¿qué pasa?
When COVID happened, right, SPX was right before COVID, February, it was at 3,400. It dipped to 2,200, and to me, no one's ever seen anything quite like that, where on the way down, they're, you know, circuit breaker, they keep stopping everything. So that to me was brand new. But I think recognizing when the markets are super volatile and there's a lot of fear, that is a moment where it's two situations where on the way down, you have to recognize that the market is in a situation where you need to take risk off, because every day is gapping lower and lower. And I think if you can see that in that moment, it'll help you avoid taking big loss on your account. But at the same time, recognizing when everyone has the same sentiment as well is when
Hey, my English not so good.
Do you mean my English isn't very good?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
You should go the opposite way. So at the bottom, when it hit SPX hit 2200, I know a lot of people that sold everything. They got out of their retirement accounts, like they completely got out of the market. And then when it hit that bottom, you know, a month later, 2200, you know, SPX ripped from 2200 to 4800, right? Within, I think, 2 years, right? So that was like a market bottom. But yes, seeing downside and having to pivot and adjust, it's difficult in the beginning, recognizing that the trend is truly changing. And at the end of 2021, when the market did peak, SPX hit 4,800. The first 2 months, that was hard because I didn't believe that the market was gonna. I didn't think we were entering a bear market, even though it was clear, right? The Fed wasn't cutting rates anymore. They were talking about, you know, raising rates. So yeah, that was the market top. And I think after 2 months is when I realized, okay, it's time to size down and just appreciate the profits that you made and just wait for the market to kind of settle down. And it eventually did at the end, I'd say the end of 2022. SPX went from 4,800 to 3,500, and that marked the bottom.
And what do you do when you're in those periods? So as you said, you're taking the risk off. Is there anything in terms of strategy of like the type of trades you're taking? Do they start to change, or do you just you don't? I'm imagining you don't take, you know, it's completely set out of the market.
Yeah,
but do the types of trades you're looking at differ depending on the market conditions?
So I would say we're definitely trading puts more, betting on the downside, and I'm also selling premium more. So basically, most people will buy calls and buy puts, so it's like a directional trade. There's the other side of the market where you can sell a call and sell a put to where you collect the premium. So essentially, you want the premium to go to zero. So it's a slower way to make money, but it's a type of, I guess, strategy where you should be right about 80 to 90% of the time. All the options just go to zero. You take all the premium. So during that time in 2022, I was selling a lot of calls and just collecting the premium as the market went lower. So you're not making a huge amount, but you're at least making money.
And you're purely focused on options, right? Have you dabbled into other areas?
I mean, I buy shares of stock. I do own Bitcoin, but yeah, I'm pretty much primarily options trader.
In terms of the markets now coming in with President Trump, right? He's going to get inaugurated soon. You know, does that change anything for you? And obviously, the last 4 year period that he had, the markets were hot. There was a lot of movement, a lot of volatility. Does that? Is there anything that you do in preparation for that, or you just wait to see what happens and react accordingly?
I would say it doesn't really matter who's president. The stock market will make its move regardless, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. The market has always performed. It always goes up. So even when Democrats are president, the markets have ripped, right? Especially when Biden was in office, 2020 to 2024, the market has trended higher. So I'm more of just waiting to see what happens at the inauguration, and then you react to the price action. So right now the market's looking a little toppy in the short term. So we'll see if they break it lower over the next week and a half, and then maybe when Trump's inaugurated, it'll pop back up. So.
And just before we have a little segment at the end, I collected loads of questions from the audience. This is a good one. So this person's asking how to enjoy the process. They said they're too focused on the goal and therefore not enjoy the process. Versus how do they actually enjoy the journey as they're going along?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing about enjoying the process is you actually have to like the stock market. You have to like finance and being in an environment where there's risk. So most people want the goal of money because they want just the money. So to truly enjoy the process, you have to like this world of volatility and stocks and the unknown. So that's where I would start. Like, you have to ask yourself that question first, and then if the answer is yes, yes, yes to all those, then that's where you start to really begin to enjoy the process. Because when I first started, I looked at that chart, American Apparel, and I'm like, wow, this $1 to $2 and I could make that much. I was like, okay, well, let me study more charts. And if I study the right charts, then I can make a lot of money. And that's what how the process starts of you diving deep into all these different elements of trading in the stock market. So ask yourself those questions first, and if there's more yeses than nos, then I think you can enjoy what you're doing.
At this point, this is a question from me, but at this point, would you say you're more motivated by the money or more motivated by your performance as a trader?
I think I'm more motivated by the process of just winning. Like having an idea, having a thesis on what you think the market's going to do and being right. Right. And the thing that I like about trading is most people will think a certain way, meaning right now everyone's very bearish. Everyone thinks, okay, it's a double top, head and shoulders, we're going to go much lower. SPX is going to go to the 200-day moving average. And me, I like to think contrarian to a lot of people. And when I'm right in those situations, it makes me feel good because I think that having that type of mentality and that thought process can in turn make you a lot of money. And with money, you can help a lot of people.
This is very true. And plus, I always see it as it's like twofold, because when you focus on the process, you end up getting the money anyway as a byproduct of that. Versus when you focus on the money, nothing wrong with that. I'm sure there's people who are motivated by money who make good money, right, and perform very well as well. But I think when you focus on the money, there's two sides. There's those people, but then there's a lot of the other side where I think you become more emotional, because when you're focused on money in trading, inevitably you're going to lose money. So it's the opposite of what you're focused on and what your goal is. So how does your mindset go then when you're like, imagine being that 1.5 million down, but your focus and goal is purely money. What's going to happen to your mindset? Because you've just completely gone backwards, right?
Yeah.
So I always find that interesting. I really do. I think we've talked about this, but I'll ask it anyway just in case. But we said, what was the specific change?
Di Booking.com, kami tidak hanya punya hotel, tapi juga rumah pohon.
That you made to become profitable, and they put in detail.
Okay, so I'll kind of tell you how I went from like 6,000 to 100. So kind of talked about a little, but I'll go into more depth. Is when you start with a small amount of money, you can't take a trade every day, and you can't have these daily monetary goals where like I'm gonna make $100 a day. And I saw that people around me, people that I knew that tried to do that, and every day presents different levels of risk and reward. You can't make the same every day. It may work for a week or 2 weeks, but in the long run, it's not possible. So I quickly realized that waiting for momentum, right, those 12 to 14 weeks in a year, if you can just wait during those weeks, you can go from $5,000 to $100,000 very quickly. Like when the market breaks certain levels, right? Like when SPX was at 3,500 pre-COVID, it dipped to 2,200. If you just waited for it to get back to 3,500, traded that all-time high breakout level, it went from 3,500 to 4,800 within a short period of time. If you bought a long-dated option, you could make 1,000%, right? So you go from $5,000 to $50,000, or maybe $100,000 if you traded shorter dated. So waiting for momentum, waiting for that 12 to 14 weeks when you have a small account, it's everything. If you want to grow an account, that's how I did it.
To focus on like quality over the quantity.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to ask there as well, in terms of breakouts, being your bread and butter and that being like the sort of the trade that you're more mainly focused on, what happens when you have a false breakout? So price breaks out, then comes right back into the range again, or even ends up selling off. Like what happens in that scenario?
In that situation, that's when number one, I take the L on the trade. But then you have to be more defensive, because if one stock, let's say Nvidia, is trying to break out above 153, the all-time high, projected very quickly and pulled back, I was in that trade. And when I saw how quickly it sold off, I didn't try to enter again, because it sold off after an event where the CEO had a talk here in Vegas. That's when you have to just not be stubborn and not try to just jump back in again and again to try to make your money back. I think that's really important on false breakouts, is when it fails at a very important level, you need to let it drop. And it went from 153 to like 134 within a couple of days. So if you kept trying over and over, you're going to get your account blown up.
Definitely. Was that something you had to learn the hard way?
Oh, yeah. yeah.
Is it a case, though, that if that happens, does that essentially make the next time around when you get back to that level, maybe a stronger case for it to take place, because the more times you do the shakeout, it was someone gave me a good analogy on gold, I believe it was, where you had an all-time high, and the all-time high was hit 3 times. Every single time sold off. The 4th time is when it actually blew up, because the psychology of the average trader now is it's going to sell off again. So now they're positioning themselves for that sell.
En una zona, menos va a haber un fake out en esa zona.
And then not only do the buys take place, it has such a strong surge.
La liquidez, no tienen necesidad de volver a hacerlo, ya se acerca para romperla. Quiero ver quién es
I would
este
say,
tío,
like, let's say Nvidia is at 153 again.
A ver.
En la caja de comentarios.
¿Está en la caja de comentarios?
Tiene que estar por aquí seguro.
Aquí no aparece.
Más para arriba, a ver qué dice ahí.
Brando.
Lo voy a buscar rápidamente.
No sé. Bueno. Cerramos el directo por aquí.
Sí, que ya es tardecito, son ya para las 6 de la mañana.
Bitcoin.
Besitos
pues,
a todos.
Para variar, no se ha movido. Bueno, a ver si te ha sacado.
No, yo espero que rompa, porque ya este doble techo, espero que rompa para arriba un poquito.
Sí, pero bueno, analizando la liquidez es lo que te he comentado. Estaba así, es lo que te digo, que cuando está en un rango y empieza y sale una barra de liquidez por un lado, pues está aquí, por el lado, suele ir el precio al lado contrario, y es lo que ha hecho. Y... a ver... sí, justo se ha ido a barrer aquí. Mira, bueno.
Pero en 3 días hay un montón por arriba también.
Mira, acaba de salir otra por aquí. Lo normal es que vuelva a tirar hacia arriba y limpio la de arriba.
Pero bueno, pues nada, mañana más y mejor.
Pero nada, estamos fuera ahora mismo, no hay ninguna operación activa, nada.
Y hasta que no barra por arriba no creo que entre.
Mañana se espera... Mañana es miércoles, mañana tiene que haber noticia importante. Inventarios de petróleo, nada, pues nada, es que es una semana, vamos a tener una semana muy aburrida.
Yo creo que sí. Hombre, si limpia por arriba, a ver si una puñetera vez.
Nada, pues vamos a cerrar aquí el directo, dice Will.
Gracias, me llevo unos ganas de podcast. Pues sí, está guay, la verdad me ha gustado la entrevista, está chula.
Está entretenido, sí, este canal.
Sí. Pero
bueno,
sí.